All right, everyone. We have begun to record this event. Good afternoon to everyone, and I hope that you and your families are safe and healthy, and have had a blessed and joyous start to your new year. Let me also take a moment to wish everyone a very happy Black History Month. Thank you for making time to attend this afternoon's Technical Assistance webinar on completing your annual performance reports, APRs, for your HSI Division Program grants. My name is Margarita L. Melendez, and I serve as the program lead for the POHA program, as well as a program specialist for the STEM program, and the DHSI program, and as lead for our Puerto Rico grantees. I would like to thank my supervisor and director of the HSI division, Dr. Stacy Slayevovich. Thank you also to all of my wonderful HSI division colleagues that have joined us today and are monitoring the chat and providing other supports. Most importantly, thank you to all of you for your tireless devotion to your students and for all that you do every day on their behalf, as well as for your schools, your fellow faculty and staff, and the communities that you serve. I see that there is already a hand raised. Is there a way to unmute this individual, or can you ask your questions in the chat? Okay, are others able to hear me? Could you give me a thumbs up or put a message in the chat if you're able to hear me? Okay, I'm getting a lot of thumbs up, so it sounds like perhaps there's a technical issue on your end. I'm not exactly sure how to address that. Could one of my colleagues please check in with Dr. Prakash Nair, N-A-I-R, because I see that she has her hand up and she has not been unmuted, and I don't know what her question or issue is. Okay, I will go on. A few words before we begin. I hope you have had the opportunity to review the letter of instructions sent on February 6, 2024 from Dr. Jason Cottrell, OPE's lead research analyst. In this letter, Dr. Cottrell highlights that this year we have a new version of the APR form, which includes a new Section 6 for grantees submitting their final performance reports after the end of their grants. This is something that we have not done in the past, so there really was not a way to specify in the form that this is a final or a last year report. Now we finally have that. In addition to this new section for final reports in the revised APR form, there are several other changes to the APR form that we will be reviewing during this webinar. On the HEPIS website, and HEPIS stands for Higher Education Programs Institutional Service, and the website is hepis.ed.gov, you can download a copy of the user guide and a blank copy of the new APR form. There are also many other technical assistance resources available to you on the HEPIS Help tab. Within the next week, we will provide everyone a copy of today's PowerPoint slides, the instructions document that goes in more detail with the information provided on the slides, an appendices document that expands on the information in that instructions form and the information on the slides, as well as a blank copy of the new API form, a blank copy of the Ed 524 budget form, and an FAQs document with any questions and our corresponding responses received during this webinar. Please note that the blank APR form that you'll see on the HEPIS website and that we'll share with you does look different from the form in HEPIS. However, the differences that you see are due to formatting. The content is the same. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube playlist. So if you need to leave early or if you have colleagues that missed this session, not to worry, as they can watch the recording later. Also, please allow me to clarify that if you are a new grantee, in other words, you received a grant that started on October 1, 2023, you will not be completing an APR. Rather, you will be completing an interim performance report, an IPR, that will cover the first 6 months of your grant. The IPR form is essentially an abbreviated form of the APR. That part of the HEPA system will open on April 1 and close on Friday, May 3rd. We will offer a separate TA webinar for the IPRs on Thursday, March 21st from 2:30 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. In the reminder that we sent you all this morning about today's webinar, there is information and login instructions for the IPR webinar if you need that. If you are completing an IPR and are a new grantee and you would like to stick around, that is fine. Please know that you should still find the content of today's webinar useful to you. One more point of clarification, and we will remind you again at the end of the webinar. For questions related to the HEPA system, in other words, access to the system, problems with your passwords, problems with your user ID, formatting, where to put what data into what boxes, please contact the HEPA system. For questions related to your grant project and or the program under which you were funded, that is to say, the DHSI program, the STEM program, or the POHA program, please contact your program specialist. We are also sometimes referred to as program officers, and on your grant award notifications that we call the GAN, we're also referred to as the education program contacts. So the education program contacts for the HSI division, and if you don't know who your person is, please look on box 3 of your GAN. They are Jimmy Seward, Dr. Robin Dabney, Rick Gaona, and Jerry Clark, Curran Cusimano Abrams, and me. I would like to emphasize before we begin reviewing the slides, the critical importance of providing timely and accurate data to us as you complete your APRs. The department uses these data to report on the progress of your programs to Congress, the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, the general public, and other federal oversight bodies, among others. This information is also extremely helpful to us, your program specialists, as it allows us to fully understand your progress, your challenges, your data issues, your technical assistance needs, promising practices, and trends in the field. As you prepare your APRs, consider how your project is contributing to knowledge, practice, research, or policy in the fields of minority student development, post-secondary student success, and other related academic and policy fields. Consider the impact of your grants on your organizational culture and the broader community of which you are a part. Finally, consider also how your projects are helping to advance the department's mission and goals. We have included information on the department's mission and our strategic plan for 2022 to 2026 in the appendices documents, and we encourage you to thoughtfully review these materials. We would like to move beyond seeing the reporting process as just a requirement for being funded and to a more holistic understanding of how your efforts and your work in your communities are helping to advance the mission of the department and therefore providing a world-class education to all of our nation's learners. In essence, we are telling the story of how our grants make a difference in our students' lives, and everyone can relate to a good, compelling story. Before moving on to the first slide, are there any questions or concerns? And if my colleagues could please let me know if anyone has their hand raised or if there are any questions in the chat that I need to address.
Not seeing any questions, Margarita.
Okay, great. So please note that we have disabled your cameras. Your microphones are muted currently and will be opened when you ask questions. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to raise your hand and teams will track who raises their hands first. So we will go in order and I will answer them as we move along. You do not need to wait until the end to ask your questions. Alternatively, you may type your questions in the chat and I will pause periodically to address them, or one of my colleagues may respond to them directly. Please note that as much as we prepare every year, we always receive questions that we may not know the answer to immediately, but rest assured that we will get back to you. Being responsive to your needs is our top priority. And now, as we start review of the PowerPoint slides, I will go off camera so that your full attention is on the content. Just verifying that everyone is still able to see the slides. Could somebody give me a thumbs up, please? Excellent. Okay, I see that there are now, are these people who have questions or are they just letting me know that they can see the slides?
They put down their hand, so I think they just were saying they could see the slides.
Okay, great. Wonderful. I wondered if I had done something. All right, great. So we've basically talked about the information in this slide already. So let me just move on to the next slide. So as I mentioned before, the system will open on February 5. So that was a little over 2 weeks ago. It will close on Friday, April 5th. Please be aware of the fact that only the project director may submit the report. And it's very important that the project director that we have on file for you have a .edu ending or a suffix. The project director's email address cannot end with yahoo.com or gmail.com or anything like that because the HEPA system will reject it. So please make sure that the project director's, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather. Please make sure that the project director's email address matches the institution's website. Also provided for you here in the last bulleted item, the Uniform Guidance Citations for Reporting, 200.328 for financial reporting and 200.329 for performance reporting. Sometimes we get asked this question, so let me just anticipate it now. The APR is a combined reporting form where you are reporting both on financials and on performance. So what you have here is a screenshot of the updated cover sheet of the new APR form. And now we'll get into the particulars. The cover sheet is pretty straightforward. We usually don't have a lot of issues with this. Provided some information here on your PR numbers. We've also provided you with the link for finding your OPEID number if you don't have it, as well as your NCES ID number if you don't have it. However, let me just mention that your budget office or your grant office would have these numbers as well. But if you want to look it up, these are the years. The duration for all of our grants is 5 years. However, if you have requested a no-cost time extension and you are reporting for year 6, then make sure that you mark yes for the question, is this a no-cost extension year? And you will notice here in green and with asterisks in front and behind of it, the word new in all caps. For every section of the new APR form where there has been a revision or an addition, we have marked it with new. So this is something new that you will see on the cover sheet. And if you are in year 6, that no cost extension year, then you will need to complete section 6. And we will review that as we go along. If you are not in year 6, then you don't need to mark that and you don't need to complete section 6. If you need a reminder of when your performance period start and end dates are, you can look that up on your grant award notification or your GAN. However, let me just state, for the record, we are currently in fiscal year 2024. We are reporting on fiscal year 2023. Everything that you are writing in your report is about fiscal year 2023. Fiscal year 2023 started on October 1, 2022, and ended on September 30th, 2023. That is fiscal year 2023 for the feds. And the grant type for everyone here is institutional. Moving on then, here we have a screenshot of the first part of the executive summary page for the revised form. And here is a breakdown of what is requested on this page. So question 1 is asking about enrollment, graduation, persistence/retention, and fiscal stability. Your answers to question 1 should be one sentence ideally and no more than one paragraph. Question 2 should have the longest response in the entire executive summary. In question 2, you are summarizing the major milestones accomplished during the most recent performance period. And as a reminder, that performance period is October 1, 2022 to September 30th, 2023, the most recent federal fiscal year that has been completed. What are milestones? Milestones are the goals and objectives from your Comprehensive Development Plan, or CDP, as outlined in your application. We ask here, please, that you do not cut and paste from your application, except to restate your goals and objectives as necessary. You may use bullets. Emphasize your most important accomplishments. I will stress here that everyone in the HSI division has 90 to over 120 grants each. So writing a lot in your reports is really a hindrance and not a help to us. We need you to be succinct and to tell us in very clear and not lengthy language exactly what you have been able to accomplish. For question 3, which is a new question, this is where you provide project highlights for this reporting period. Also note here any technical assistance or help that you may need. Question 3 could be a summary of what you provided in question 2. For question 3, you can provide a bulleted list of your high-level accomplishments. For question 2, you can provide a little bit of narrative to provide some context for those major milestones. For question 4, this is where you describe how your project has contributed to evidence-based research, knowledge, practice, and or policy. So how has the implementation of this grant project impacted your school, your students, and your faculty? Where possible, we ask that you include examples in your attachments. So for example, if one of your project faculty has had a paper published in a peer-reviewed journal, we would like to see this. If you did a conference presentation, we would like a copy of that presentation. If there have been changes to your academic programs, we would like to see those as well. Again, what you need to remember is that these are institutional grants. These grants are supposed to be bringing about changes at the institutional level. So as opposed to the TRIO programs or the Veterans Program or the Upward Bound programs, which are student-centered grants, these are institutional-centered grants. So we want to see that changes are being made at the university or the college level. So I've heard a lot of dinging. So let me stop here for a moment and ask if there are any questions that I need to address.
I think the only question that I think would be helpful to be addressed out loud, because there was another one that I can respond to, is can you give examples of highlights that we would use and technical assistance we would need?
Well, as far as the technical assistance, you would know what kind of technical assistance you would need. And if you're not sure what kind of technical assistance you would need, then I would suggest that you follow up with your program specialist regarding that. As far as highlights are concerned, as I stated just a moment ago, in question 2, where you're describing your milestones in 2 to 4 paragraphs, you can select your high level accomplishments that you listed in question 2 as your highlights in question 3. So in other words, imagine that you were providing a summary of your major accomplishments or your major wow points to someone like on your governing board or maybe your state senator or something like that. They don't have a lot of time to listen to a long, lengthy discussion. You need to give them bulleted information. We did 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's what we're looking for here in question 3 when we're talking about project highlights. I hope that that's helpful.
And there's another question, Margarita, that states that this person is a new Title V director. She started in October of 2023, but she was told that she is supposed to write the APR for the last Title V that just ended in September of 2023, as the project director for that grant is no longer employed at the college. She says she's not listed as the project director for the previous Title V, and how should she go about requesting access to the APR? She can, since she's the new project director, can she just go into HEPIS? So I'll let you answer that.
Right. So that's really not a question very related to what we're talking about, but we can certainly provide you with assistance. So if you could please follow up with the program specialist that is assigned to those grants. I don't know if the same program specialist is assigned to both of those grants, or you could even just reach out to me, margarita.melendez@ed.gov, if you're not sure who they are. We can find out who are the program specialists assigned to your grant and provide you with any assistance that you need with that. We do understand it would be difficult for you to prepare a report for a project that you haven't worked on before. However, you can certainly use the last APR that was submitted to help you as you prepare the APR for the current year. You wouldn't need to start from scratch. So hopefully that provides you with some relief as far as, how much work you would have to do there.
Margarita, we have a couple of other questions, if you don't mind.
No, not at all. That's why I'm here.
And thank you for answering the question that Jean was asking. I was responding in the chat, but we have one about what is the limit to the number of documents that we can upload with the APR, such as our evaluation. My understanding is 3, but I wanted to double check that that hasn't changed.
Yes, Karen, I think you're right. It's either 3 or 4. And I believe when you go into the HEPA system, the system tells you what the limit is, or when you get to the limit, it will no longer allow you to add any additional attachments. But I think you're right. I think it is 3.
Awesome. And just, sorry.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, so we would ask you to prioritize your evaluator's report. So if you have an evaluator who provides you with a separate evaluation report, which is separate and apart from this annual performance report, please make sure you include that evaluator's report. There's another place where we also ask you to append that. And if you need to or you want to provide more attachments than what the HEPA's programs allowed, then you can just send those additional attachments directly to your program specialist via email, and make sure that you add a message saying, these are additional attachments that I am providing along with the APR that was submitted. That way we know that in the official G5 grant file, that those documents are included as part of the entire APR package.
Thank you, Margarita. There is a couple more questions Just one, I think we can combine these two questions because they're along the same lines of if they've developed informational materials for their campus, and then someone mentions also student presentations at conferences, should they upload those to the APR?
Those could be helpful. We want to make sure, though, especially for student presentations, are they evidence-based? So question 4 specifically asks about evidence-based research knowledge, practice, and or policy. Anything that would have been developed by the project staff or the project faculty, I'm assuming will be evidence-based because they are familiar with the application. And in the application, you are required to meet the evidence standards of demonstrates a rationale through your logic model and promising evidence. However, students that are, impacted by the project, they may not be aware of those standards or even know what to do with those standards. So any type of presentation that a student may have, put together may not meet that evidence-based criterion. However, I would still share it with your program specialist and say, this is something that our students presented as a part of the project. We want to share this with you. And then, the program specialist will make the determination as to whether it is, should be part of the APR package or whether it's just something that we keep as part of the official grant file. That is an excellent question. Thank you. There are other questions?
I believe that is it. There was just one about combining PDFs, but and this might be helpful for the group. I believe there is a size limit to the documents you upload. You can definitely try to combine PDFs. You might get an error message if it's over the size limit. But as Margarita mentioned, please feel free to send any additional attachments to your program specialist.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to go on and I'll stop again for questions after a few slides. Thank you all so much. So here is an example, and we didn't do this last year, so let me just state, every year when we do these technical assistance webinars, we try to get better at it. So there were some suggestions that were made last year that we include examples. So here is one example of using bullets for answering question 2. So as you can see, this is very nicely done. It meets all the requirements of answering these questions. This is about, I don't know, I'd say about a good 1.5 to 2 paragraphs in length, but it's summarized as bullets. And I thought it was an excellent example of how to answer question 2 that I wanted to provide to everyone. Moving on then to the second part of the executive summary, questions 5 and 6. Here's a screenshot of that. And then let's talk about the specific questions. So question number 5 asks about unexpected outcomes due to the project or challenges. So we ask that you please share with us any unexpected outcomes, whether they be good or bad, or any challenges that you've had with your project. If you have nothing to report, please indicate nothing to report. Hopefully, you've kept in contact with your program specialist over the year, so you wouldn't be putting anything in question 5 that would be a surprise to him or to her. Please know that, we're not here to got you with anyone. We ask this question because we really want to be able to help you and to tailor the technical assistance to help you help your students to become successful. So if something didn't turn out the way you thought it was going to turn out and it caused an issue, let us know about it and we can work through it together. Question 6 is about the evidence standard. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, for the HSI Division programs, which are the DHSI program, the POHA program, and the STEM program, we have 2 standards. The demonstrates a rationale, which you demonstrate through a logic model, and the promising evidence. So for question 6A and 6B, you need to mark boxes tier 4 and or tier 3 and cite the studies that you provided in your proposal. In responding to questions 6C, D, and E, relative to the implementation, evaluation, and results of your intervention, please include a few sentences that explains how the logic model and the promising evidence cited studies have guided your work and any challenges or lessons learned based on your implementation. So we understand that when you submit a proposal to us, it's a lot of theoretical underpinnings, it's a lot of wishful thinking, but once you actually start implementing that project, once things are on the ground, things can change. So this is where you can tell us a little bit what your journey looked like from theory to practice. There is a new part for this question. For questions Q6F, please attach a copy of your logic model from your application. If you have modified your logic model since the time of application, provide your updated logic model as well. So let me make a clarification here, hopefully to avoid some confusion. For many of you, your logic model is your logic model at the time that you submitted your application, and it will not change. That is fine. You do not have to change your logic model ever if you don't want to, and we don't require that you change it. However, some evaluators, as part of their offered services, will modify or update your logic model as the project progresses. So if you work with that kind of an evaluator and you have an updated logic model, then you can submit that logic model along with your original logic model. This is optional, so please, I don't want anyone to get all worried about this because this is something optional, and if you don't do it, then that's perfectly fine. So moving on then to the next part of the executive summary, questions 7, 8, and 9 about formative and summative evaluation. Here is a screenshot of that relevant section of the page. Let's go through each one of these. So question 7 asks about formative evaluation. So formative evaluation is done to improve an intervention as you are doing it. And it may not be for the entire project, but for one or two activities for which you are evaluating your progress. Formative evaluation tends to be very informal. It tends to be qualitative. It's the type of evaluation that you would do, say, as you're flying the plane, so to speak. So with regard to question 7A, everyone should have formative evaluation. So as you are conducting activities, putting on workshops, interacting with your students, you see what works and what doesn't work. You're getting feedback from your faculty. You're having interactions with different departments within your university, and you're making notes of all of that. And you're making notes of what works well and what doesn't work well. Everything that I just described, that is formative evaluation. So everybody should have that. Question 7B asks you specifically how your formative evaluation has yielded improvements. You don't need to write a master's thesis here. Just a few sentences is fine. It's really just a check-in to make sure that you're using your formative evaluation to make your project better. Question 8 is new because we've changed the language. But in the previous version of the APR, we did ask about summative evaluation. However, the language here is a little bit different. It says to provide information on any evaluation, assessment, or research conducted for your project. In other words, summative evaluation. And what is summative evaluation? As opposed to formative evaluation, which is trying to help you make your project better as you conduct it. Summative evaluation is about helping you to draw conclusions about whether or not what you're doing is worth it, or whether it's being done in the best ways. In other words, presenting conclusions about the merit or worth of an intervention, which in this case is your project, and recommendations about whether it should be retained, altered, or eliminated. Summative evaluation usually involves qualitative data or mixed methods, so quantitative and qualitative data. But you do tend to see a lot more quantitative data in many of these summative evaluation documents. So please mark yes or no. And for question 8A, and this is also new for this versions of the form, please select all that apply. And for many of our grantees, you will be marking more than one box in this list. So you may have an external evaluator, so someone that you hired specifically for this project. You may have an institutional research office that does all of your evaluations at the college or university. You may have both an outside and an inside person working on different parts of that evaluation plan. And we're seeing this happen more and more within the very recent past. Or there could be some other researcher that is funded by the grant or another researcher that's not funded by the grant. So please mark all of the boxes that are relevant. For question 8B, and again, this is new, we specifically ask you to identify the evaluator for your project. So if there is more than one evaluator or if there is an evaluation team, please make sure to describe the roles each play and their respective organizations. So you don't need to include their Vita or their CV, but please make sure you put their contact information, so like their name and their email address. And again, if there's an evaluation team, all of the individuals who are associated with that evaluation team. Here you would provide a 1 to 2 paragraph summary of your evaluation results. And please make sure that in that 1 to 2 paragraph summary, you are providing high level results for your evaluation plan to date. So don't just cut and paste from the executive summary of your evaluator's report, because those executive summaries usually go on for 2 to 3 pages. You should only be providing high-level results of your evaluation plan to date in this section. If you're having a hard time whittling that down, please work with your evaluator to obtain this language. And then finally, and after this bullet, I'll attend to any questions or comments. As far as the evaluation results, include attachments such as your evaluator's reports and other data related to your project after this section. So if you have surveys or questionnaires, or if you have like spreadsheets or other types of data documents related to retention, completion, graduation, transfer, etc., you should include those if you have them. And again, regarding artifacts related to the evaluation, journal articles, presentations, publications, again, hopefully by project staff or project faculty, because we would want these items to be evidence-based. So let me stop here for questions.
Hi, Margarita. So we have a couple of good questions in the chat. The first one is, my grant was finished under a different RFP without the tier 3 or tier 4 classifications. So they can't answer question 6 the way it is stated, and they're wondering what they should do.
Okay, it sounds like you may have a much older grant. All of the grant cohorts that I am familiar with that are active now have some kind of an evidence standard. So I would ask that that project director please reach out to their program specialist for assistance with that question.
Thank you. And we have a question from Alberto. When and where do we submit the consultant that provides assessments?
If the consultant that provides assessment is that, if that is your evaluator, then you would provide that person's contact information in question 8B, and you would include a copy of their evaluator's report, if they give you one, in the attachment section under question 9.
And then we have, we hired an external evaluator to complete the formative evaluation. Can we just attach their report?
Yes, of course, you can attach their report, and we want you to attach their report. However, you still need to answer question 8B, which means that you need to provide the contact information for all of your evaluators. You still need to provide a 1 to 2 paragraph summary of your high level evaluation results. And in question 8A, you still need to mark all of the boxes that apply regarding who your evaluators actually are. So you can't just attach the evaluation report and, expect your program specialist to go back and fill this out for you. You need to answer all of the questions. And again, I want to emphasize, we really need your all's help in doing all of this and doing it timely. All of us have between 90 to over 130 grants. And so when there are missing pieces in the APR and we have to go back to you for clarification or for data, that really slows down the process. We are also working up against an early summer deadline to have all of our non-competing continuation awards made. And so, we rely on the information that you provide in these reports to help us to review your performance and make these decisions as quickly and smoothly as possible.
I believe we have,
yeah,
we have a hand raised from Glory Mar. Let me go ahead and unmute you. I think you should be able to unmute and ask your question now.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to let you know that in the HEPIS platform, question 8A, you have a duplication of one of the options, and you are in fact missing the option other researcher funded by the grant. So just so that you know, that's as it is right now in the platform.
Okay, so Dr. Santini, you're saying that the fourth bullet is missing in the HEPIS platform?
The third one is duplicated, so the fourth, as you have it in your presentation, is not available.
Oh, okay. All right. So let me make a note of that, and I will let Jason know that that needs to be fixed. And this is for, I'm sorry, I'm just making a note of this before I forget. Thank you for catching that. Are there any other questions or concerns for now?
Yes, there is a hand raised by Ashley Davis.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead and unmute your, allow your mic, Ashley.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, no problem. Unless that was a legacy hand, Ashley.
Oh, no, I had a quick question about question 6F. I do not see that on my system, and I don't see a place to attach our logic model. What would I need to do for that? Would I just need to send that separately to my program officer?
Okay, Dr. Davis, so are you saying that for question 6F, you don't see it in the HEPIS platform?
No, I do not.
Okay, so I've added that to the list of issues that I'm gonna ask Jason to request that the HEPIS staff take a look at. Whenever you use a new form, there are always little technical kinks that you got to work out. So I'm glad that you all are pointing these out to us. And if there are any other little clinks, little things that are, not there as they should be, let us know so that we can get them fixed. Any other questions or fixes that we need to be aware of?
I think that is it for now.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. If you could mute everyone again, and then when I pause again for questions, we can unmute as needed. All right, then. So moving on then to section 2, institutional profile. This is a screenshot of the revised form, and as you can see, there are some significant changes. So for Section 2, the institutional profile, this is where you are reporting on your institutional measures or your GAPR measures. So please note that there is a big change here. So instead of reporting on 2-year, 4-year, or 6-year graduation rates, you will report on 100% time to graduation rate and 150% time to graduation rate. You will also note that an extra column has been added for year 6. So let me start by saying before, we have questions, it's very important that before you do anything for this section, you need to go into the iPad system and you need to review the definitions for fall enrollment, graduation rate, and retention rate. We've provided a live link here so that you can go to the glossary, and I've tried this, so I know that it works. You type in these terms into that link, and it will give you a very comprehensive definition of what these terms are. And for some of these definitions, there are further links that provide you with additional data. I've made a few notes here about these specific terms. So the fall enrollment will include students enrolled in degree, certificate, and credential programs, as well as students enrolled in vocational or occupational programs, students enrolled off campus or in extension centers, and high school students in dual enrollment, so enrolled in courses for college graduation credit. So although for your particular HSI Division program, you may not be counting these students for your project, when it comes to your IHE enrollment, which is part of that fall enrollment definition, all of those types of students would need to be included in that. The graduation rate is calculated as the total number of completers within 150% of normal time divided by the revised adjusted cohort. And if you go into the definition for graduation rate in iPads, you will get the definition for revised adjusted cohort. I did it, and it gave me that extra definition. Also, for retention rates, those are defined differently for 4-year institutions and for other institutions. So if you are a community junior technical college, so you're a 2-year institution, those retention rates are defined differently. You need to go into the iPad's glossary and see what those definitions are. Another thing that I would add here, before you reach out to your program specialist to ask a lot of questions about these particular data points, you first need to go to your institutional research office and work with them. Because a lot of the questions that you may be asking us, we would not have that data. We would not have your fall enrollment data. We would not have your retention data. That is something that your institutional research office would have. You need to obtain that data from them. And then once you have that data and you do the calculations based on the definitions in this iPad's glossary, then if you have questions, then reach out to your program specialist. But anticipatory questions before getting the data from your IHE institutional research folks, that is not really going to help you to complete this section quickly. Moving on then, and this is a new slide because we've received some questions over the year regarding what do we mean by GEPR measures and what are we including in the GEPR measures. So as I said a few moments ago, GEPR measures should be tied to your institutional measures. GEPR stands for the Government Performance and Results Act of 1993. GEPR measures are established for entire programs and not for your specific projects. So data collected from the GEPR measures are aggregated by the department and used to provide a snapshot of the programs as a whole. They are broad measures of institutional performance that look at things such as enrollment, graduation, transfer, and retention. So when you are doing the calculations for your GEPR measures, you need to use the data that is IHE specific and not project specific. In other words, when you're looking at your enrollment numbers, when you're looking at your graduation numbers, you should be looking at your numbers for your university or your college as a whole and not for your specific project. Now, you may have project-specific measures that look at just graduation and retention for your project. But when you are reporting on the GEPR measures, you should be including institution-wide numbers. Why do we ask for this? Because the Titles 3 and 5 programs that you all have are institutional grants whose purpose is to bring about institution-wide change. Therefore, the GEPR measures data should reflect the entire IHE. Remember also that we are capturing your project-specific data in these GEPR measures, and you are able to demonstrate that your projects are working through the GEPR measures that should indicate system-wide change, which is the purpose of our grants. Let me stop here and see if we have any questions, since we are providing some new guidance here, clarifying our guidance.
Yeah, so we have a question from Courtney. She says, for continuing grants at two-year institutions, it auto-populated our four-year graduation rates we reported in past years under 150% time to graduation, and I assume we now need to update that to a three-year graduation rate for all past years in addition to the current year.
Well, we're not reporting on two-year, four-year, or six-year graduation rates at this point. We are only reporting on 100% and 150% time to graduation. If you could please, Corinne, is there email address in that question? I'd like to follow up with them offline, in addition to what I've just said.
It is not, but Courtney, if you don't mind putting your email address in the chat, or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, I'll put mine in the chat and you can send your email address to me.
Right. So Courtney, you've actually brought up a good point, because data that was present in your most recently submitted report is automatically forwarded to the next reporting cycle. We might get some data points like that are still associated with the old questions. So like the 2-year, the 4-year, and the 6-year. And now we're using 100% and 150%. We might have those issues, pop up, but we will deal with them on a case-by-case basis so that we get accurate data. What's the next question, Karen?
My IR director asked a couple of questions. First, do we use the same cohort for the 100% and 150% rate, or two different cohorts?
Well, you would use the cohort that was written into your application unless you requested to change that cohort with your program specialist. There shouldn't be any change in the cohort unless I'm missing something. So the cohort should be the cohort that existed at the time that your application was approved and began.
And then I think we have three questions that are similar, discussing. So basically, for the GEPR measures, we need to report institutional level data and project level data.
Right. So you will, this is just, so this part here is because you're entering information on the institutional profile, okay? So this is for the data that you're entering in this section. But there is another section that we'll see in just a moment that really gets into the weeds on this, where you're breaking up your responses for both the GEPRA and the project level, and that's the project status chart. So yes, what that project director wrote in the question is correct. So for the GEPRA measures, when they're reporting on GEPRA measures, they need to use institutional level data. And when they're reporting on project-specific measures, in other words, measures that you made up for your grant when you wrote your application, then you can use your project-level measures. So in many cases, you may be reporting the same types of data, but at different levels. Sometimes you're reporting data on the institutional level. Sometimes you're reporting data at the project level, and that's fine. Other questions, Karen?
Yes, confirming that we are reporting enrollment and retention for 2022 to 2023, meaning the academic year. And does that mean you want enrollment and retention for fall of 2022?
Right. So the federal fiscal year doesn't align exactly with the academic year, but just assume that the federal fiscal year starts October 1, which is in the midst of that fall semester. You can include data from the beginning of your semester or your academic year for that reporting period. So it would be the academic year of fall 2022 and spring 2023, as well as summer 2023, if you have a summer, summer semester. Any other questions, Karen?
Sorry, yes, one more question. The cohort we began with would have been 2021. They have not had time to graduate.
Okay. Well, then there is a box in the project status chart where you can provide information there to explain that. There is a narrative project box where you can provide that information, with a couple of sentences or whatever.
And those are all the questions.
Okay. All right. I'm sure they'll come up again when we get to the project status, but that's great. Thank you. Okay, I see a hand raised, Corinne.
I will go ahead and unmute you, Francis, and you should be able to ask your question.
Oops, there we go. So sorry. So I'm sorry, I'm still a little confused about, I'm looking at the institutional measures in 2A. And so when you're asking for 100% time to graduation and 150% time to graduation, those can't be for the cohort we're working with. Those are institutional measures. And what my IR director wanted to know is, are we looking at, like, I think it was the 2017 cohort? If we were looking at 150% and 100% for the same cohort, we'd have to go back to the 2017 cohort. If we're looking for 150% of the 2017 cohort and 100% of the 2019 cohort. So he's trying to figure out which, are we talking about one cohort or two different cohorts? And it can't be the cohort that we are starting with in our grant.
Okay, so since this is a question related to this new definition, and it's specific to your school, Francis, could you please forward that question to me and to Curran in writing, and we will obtain a response for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I go on?
No, I think we're good, Margarita.
And I'm seeing a note here that it seems to be relevant to all institutions. We'll make sure that we include Francis's question as part of the FAQs, okay? Excellent. So we'll go ahead and go on. Okay, so here is a screenshot of the next part of the institutional profile. So a lot of these are pretty straightforward. We want to know if you've had changes to your institutional leadership, such as your president or your chancellor or your provost, and if it's affected your grant. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends many times on how big your school is or other things going on. Grant leadership does seem to affect your grants more often. So if you've had a change or lots of turnover in your project director, your grant, your activity director, your grant manager, or some other key person, that usually does affect your grant in a significant way. So we want to know about that. We should know about it if you've kept in contact with your program specialist. Also, a check-in here on accreditation. We ask that you please indicate who your accrediting agency is and whether your accreditation has changed. So a change in your accreditation means that you've added new programs, that you've been reclassified from a college to a university or something to that effect. If you have had changes in your accreditation, please provide the recommendation, the relevant documentation to your program specialist via email. Here's a screenshot of the next section of the institutional profile. So here are several questions about audit. Please make sure that you check in with your budget office for this section. These questions pertain to the audit requirements pursuant to the OMB Circular A133, often referred to as the single audit requirement. So any entity that has $750,000 or more in federal funds in a fiscal year has to go through a single audit. And because each of you is getting around $600,000 a year just for this grant, then we know that the single audit requirement pertains to all of you. So everyone should have had a single audit. Again, your business office can provide you with a copy of that single audit report. So you indicate that the audit was completed. Now, if there were findings in your audit, then you need to explain in question 2A1 how the findings are being addressed, and you need to attach a copy of the report with the findings. If you did not complete the audit, then you need to explain why it was not completed, and you need to give us a timeline of when it will be completed. Please know that we have started to hold on to NCC awards that haven't been in other words, we've put a hold on certain awards until that single audit has been submitted to us. So what we'll do, and this is during the summer or earlier if we catch it, we'll send you an email letting you know that a single audit is missing. And if that single audit report is missing, we'll ask you to submit a copy to us. And until we receive that, there's like a flag on your file saying that your non-competing continuation award will not be processed until we receive a copy of your single audit report. Going on then, okay, let me just answer this question. Right, so it's you're receiving 600,000 just from us, but it's 750,000 for a whole year. So with $150,000 more, you have to have that single audit. Our grants is not the only grant that your IHE is receiving. So all of the colleges and universities that receive our grants would be subject to the single audit requirement. That's what I'm saying. We don't know the multitude of grants that you have, but we do know that our grants aren't the only grants that you're receiving. So with only $150,000 difference between the $600,000 that you get from us and any other grants that you receive from anywhere else. So think of Title IV, just the Pell Grants and the student loans that the university is giving. That counts. So we know based on that every single one of our grantees have to have a single audit. Okay. Okay, let me go back. Okay, so this next part for endowment, the questions have been changed just slightly. So if you have an endowment established for the grant that you are reporting on, you will report that activity in this section. So the period of maturity is 20 years. You must report on your endowment for 20 years from the time you establish it. There is a separate section of HEPIS to submit your endowment report. So you're not going to be reporting all the specifics on your endowment in this report, but you do acknowledge that you have an endowment as part of your grant in this section. Okay. Make sure that if you have endowments for other OPE grants, that you provide the PR numbers of those other grants under question 2A. So the next section is the LAA tables, legislatively allowable activities. The LAAs used to be at the end of the APR. Now the LAAs are farther towards the front. So LAAs are now section 3. LAAs mean legislatively allowable activities. So this is a screenshot of the LAA table for HSI STEM. And once you get the slides, you can hover over the name of the program, and this link will take you directly to legislation, regulations, and guidance for that particular program. So if you want to say, I don't know, do some reading about what all these LAA categories here, in addition to what's here, you can go on here and you can read the legislation, regulation, and guidance. So here it is for STEM. Here it is for POHA, again, hyperlinked. Here it is for DHSI, again, hyperlinked. So let's talk again what we mean by this. So LAA, as I said, means legislatively allowable activities. Sometimes these are referred to as authorized activities. For the LAA tables, we ask that you do the best that you can. If you have problems completing all of it, or you're not sure, please know that we want you to provide as much information as you can in this section, but don't worry if you cannot complete all sections of the table. Remember also that these tables list all of the legislatively allowable activities. You're probably not doing everything that the legislation allows. Your project is probably only concentrating on 3, 4, 5, or 6 of the legislatively allowable activities. It's very difficult, nor would I think it would be advisable for any grant to do every single LAA that exists. So look at those tables, identify the ones that correspond to the work that you are doing, and then fill them out. Bullet 3 reminds you that you are breaking down the expenses by legislative activity and not by the activities that you created. So remember, that table of LAAs is for activities by legislative authority, not activities as you wrote them into your grant. We realize that this is a little bit of a paradigm shift, so that's why we say just do the best that you can on this section and don't stress out too much on this section. Work with your budget and finance office to calculate the percentage of funds that your project is spending on each LEA. We would like to get as accurate data as possible. But again, just do the best that you can in this section. It seems like we're having some questions about this, Corinne. Could you share those with me?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a question. Some individuals are noting that it is not showing until section 4, and that just might be an issue with what is noted in the blank form because LAAs are noted as section 3. But if it is section 4 in HEPIS, then that's okay as well.
Yeah, that's fine. The way that it's supposed to work, and maybe it's a kink that needs to be worked out, is you should only be seeing the LAA table for your program. So say that you're reporting on your STEM program. When you go into HEPAS, you should only see the LAA table for STEM. You shouldn't see the LAA tables for any of the other programs. That's the way it's supposed to be. I don't know if something else is there. If it's grayed out and you're not able to enter any information, then drop us a line so that we can let Jason know and the HEPA staff can correct that glitch. Were there any other? I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Oh yeah, no worries. So there was a question, do we report the dollars spent and activity from the entire grant life or just the year you're reporting on? So just the year you're reporting on. So October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023.
Thank you, Karen. Other questions?
Yeah, and this is just a clarification question. Someone mentioned their LAA section is grayed out. So if you have any HEPA systems issues, please send that along to us so we can let our HEPA administrators know.
Was that it, Karen? Were there any other questions?
There was one more question. There's a lot coming in, so I'll try to answer those in the chat as well, so that we can get through our webinar. But there was one to clarify: anyone receiving over $750,000 must upload the audit report, even if there are no findings.
No, I don't think that's what the slide says. Just a moment.
Yeah, it's my understanding you upload it only if there are findings.
Right. So I'm at that slide. You upload it if there are findings. So you would explain how the findings are being addressed and attach a copy of the report with the findings. So if you didn't have any findings, then you don't need to upload a copy of your audit report.
And I'll go ahead and answer some more questions in the chat.
Okay. Thank you so much. So moving on then to section 4, and this is where we go back to the GEPR measures and the project-specific measures. So in section 4, this sometimes can be the most challenging part because this is where you are responding to the measures. So there are some changes here. I've noted it here with a new, green and new. So it's asking you to describe the expected long-term impact of your grant project in 1 to 3 sentences. In other words, what are you trying to change, create, or improve? Also include the number of activities in your grant. So in 1 to 3 sentences, describe what is the long-term impact of your project, and also give us a number for how many activities are in your grant. All of this information can be found in your original application. You also need to indicate the number of allowable activities addressed by the grant. And in the narrative, please address the quality of the change that you've seen as a result of these activities, so positive or negative. Regarding the chart itself, this is the hierarchy that you should follow for this section. Activity is at the top, objective is subsumed underneath that, and then measure is subsumed underneath that. So the way it works is that each grant activity must have at least one objective, and each objective must have at least one measure. Of course, you can have many different combinations of this, but each activity must have at least one objective, and each objective must have at least one measure. For each measure, so looking at that last bullet there, you must report on the target data, which is the number you said you would have in your application, and the actual data, so what you are actually able to achieve during the reporting year. In addition, you will be reporting using either raw data or a ratio. The ratio is where you calculate the percentage using the target and the actual numbers. You will include as well the measure type. So as I said before, you're breaking them down into GEPR and project specific, the date that you measured it, and in this case for date, we want the month and the year. We don't need the day, as in February 21, we just need February. The frequency, so do you do it on an annual, on a monthly, or whatever? And the objective status, that's very important. And there are 4 statuses that you can select from: on schedule, change in schedule, not achieved, or completed. I'm going to give a few examples of what this might look like, hoping that this will be helpful to you. So let's look at some of these examples before we get to the questions that have been coming through to the chat. So here is an example of a measurable objective. As you can see here, you have the GEPR data. As you can see here, you have, this is a project data. It was calculated from the ratio. They give you the date that it was measured, when it was measured, and when it was completed. Here is another example as well. So on this slide, we have 1 GEPR measure for this project and 2 examples of a project measures. Okay. Here is another example. Here is the text that would go with the example that we just saw before. So 2 activities. Here is the first activity. What is it called? An explanation of what the corresponding objective is, as well as the measure to gauge how you're doing with respect to that measure. The measure type is a project. Their target was 70. They actually exceeded it by going to 79%. They measured it on April 30th, but really only need April 2021. They measured it once, and this objective is completed. Here is the text for that second measure. So here is the language for it. Here is the type of measure that we have. Their target was 24. Their actual was 34. So again, they exceeded it here. This was when they measured it. This was the frequency. And this is the objective. So let me go back. So this is what it looks like here. And I'm sorry, this part here is, this part here at the top, that's just language from the form. So what we're looking at are these 2 down here. So these are 2 examples of project measures. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the chart. Okay, and then underneath the chart, if we go back over here, if we look back over here, you see that you have the chart part where you put in all the numbers, and then you have narrative explanations at the bottom. You have objective narrative, okay? So here is what was entered for the chart, and here is the information that was entered in the narrative section. And then here we have another example for a non-measurable objective. So here, GEPR, these were GEPR measures calculated from 57 and 52%. Those were the targets, and here were their actuals. So they actually exceeded here. Again, as we had in the previous example, number of activities, the name of the activity, description of the objective, a description of the measure. Okay, so that was it as far as those examples. What questions did we have for that area, Karen?
I think I have answered all the questions in the chat. Most of them are program specialist specific questions. But I do see that we have a hand raised from Agnes. So I'll go ahead and unmute your mic, Agnes. You should be able to ask your question now.
Go ahead, Agnes. We're waiting for your question.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
I noticed, thank you for taking my question. I noticed in the objective status that you showed completed in your example. My question is, if we have an ongoing project that's going to be carried out over all 5 years of the grant cycle, but we have benchmarks measurable each year, do we put completed if we met that year's benchmark, or do we put ongoing if this is a grant, say at the end of the grant, we're going to increase something by 20%. And in year 3, we made our 15%. So is it completed or is it ongoing?
You could report it either way. The important thing would be in the narrative box to provide an explanation. So if you want to put it in there as completed, then in the narrative explanation, you could say that it was completed for year 2, for example. If you want to put ongoing, then in the narrative box, you could put this was completed for year 2. However, there is additional ongoing work that will be carried on in the out years, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, there is a question. Will there be a narrative or essay text field to describe the performance measure data?
Yes, it's right here. You can't see it very well in this screenshot. I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing my cursor, but under performance measure, there's a box that says objective narrative and it's expandable. So you can type in there. And then I think I saw someone saying to provide the objective statuses again. They're here on this slide. On schedule, change in schedule, not achieved, and completed. Any other questions?
I think we're good to go.
Okay, we'll move on then since 3:53. Okay. A lot of this we have talked about already. We've talked about what the GEPR measures are. We've talked about what the project-specific measures are. We provide you here with additional information on the GEPRA. It's a statute that requires federal agencies to manage their activities with attention to the consequences. We've also provided you here with a link to the department's strategic plan, and this information is also in the appendices form that we'll provide to you sometime next week. And all of this information is to help you see how what you're doing at your school with your project helps the department to achieve its mission and its vision. All of the work that we're doing is tied to goal 4 of the department's strategic plan, which is to increase post-secondary value by focusing on access to high quality institutions, affordability, completion, et cetera, et cetera. This is more of the same. Wanting to just let you know that if you haven't looked at the GEPR measures for your program, they're in the Federal Register notices under which you're applied in Section 4. You can also find the complete list of GEPR measures by your program in that appendices document that I just mentioned. Let me just highlight here regarding for the measure on federal cost per degree that you calculate by dividing grant funds by the number of project graduates. Please also know that the department's budget service will also use the data that you have included in your APR to calculate this federal cost per degree based on your IHE's IPEDS data. So here's a screenshot of the next section, the grant project status and budget section. So here we provide definitions of what each of these different columns mean. So remember that we're always reporting a year behind. Okay, so we are now in the 2023 to 2024 academic year, but that is actually the FY24 federal fiscal year. We are reporting on the FY 2023 federal fiscal year, which corresponds to academic year 2022 to 2023. So your carryover balance is your balance from the previous fiscal year. You are reporting on 23. So that means any carryover that you had from 22. We know it can be confusing because you have to keep thinking backwards, but we just need to make sure that all of these numbers align. So the carryover would actually be from the year before the year on which you are reporting. Remember, if you get confused, one rule of thumb is always have the previous APR with you as you are completing the new report. The best thing to do is to just print it out and have last year's report with you as you're sitting at the computer and filling this out, or have it up on your screen if that's easier for you. It'll make everything easier. You can cut and paste, and all of the carryover information will be there for you. The approved budget refers to approved for the year on which you're reporting. Again, you're reporting for the FY23 fiscal year. Your total budget includes the carryover from 22 plus the approved budget for 23. The approved budget, not the budget that you actually spent. Okay, going to get to that in a moment. Your expenditures are what you actually spent in 23. That's what we're asking for in that next column. The following one, non-federal expenditures. This only applies if you had matching or other non-federal funds, such as endowment funds. We don't require matching funds. However, if you stated in your application that you were going to have matching funds, then we hold you accountable to those matching funds. Or if you set up an endowment, then you have to have matching funds, so you need to report on those. Put NA or 0 if this doesn't apply to you. The carryover balance is what you didn't spend in 23 that you had expected to spend. So it's whatever was left over after 23 was over that you now have available to you to use in the future. Next year's actual budget means the budget for this year. So the year that we're in now, that started October 1, 2023, which is the federal fiscal year 2024, that's the year that you're actually in. So what was your actual budget, your approved budget for this current year that you're in? Note that this is NA if you were reporting on year 6. If last year was your last year and you were reporting for year 6, then this one doesn't apply to you. For everyone else, this question would apply to you. And then for the last one, changes, yes or no, if there were any changes to your budget by line item. Do I have to respond to any questions, Karen? I've seen some coming in, but I don't know if you've responded to them.
Yes, I'm going through and responding to them. But this might be a helpful question for you related to POHA. So for POHA grants, is there guidance for how to report 100% and 150% time to graduation for graduate students?
Please reach out to me separately on that issue, since those are new definitions and we're still providing guidance on how to respond to that. Did we have any other questions related to this slide or to the budget, Karen?
Yes. Someone noted that it says actual budget instead of approved budget in this section. And I believe that's in reference to next year's actual budget.
Okay, well, it may have been a typo, that's fine. Whether it's actual budget or approved budget, that would be for the year in which you are reporting on. And thank you for pointing that out to us.
And there's a question of, is next year's actual budget supposed to equal the carryover alone, or does it equal carryover plus your allocation?
No. The approved budgets or the actual budgets are the budgets that we originally approved for you. So you need to go to your GAN action number 1 and look at what your budgets were. So I'm looking at a GAN right now. And if you go to box 6, award period, it will have a list of all your budget periods, and it will show what your approved budget was. So for example, I'm looking at one now, and this one shows budget periods 3, 4, and 5. In budget period 3, their budget was $599,996. In budget period 4, their budget was $599,996. And in budget period 5, it was the same amount, $599,996. So that's what we mean by your approved or your actual budget, not what your carryover was, not adding your carryover, not what you actually spent, but what we approved for you. And that's on your GAN, and it should also match what you submitted to us in that first ed budget form, unless we made any cuts.
And I think a lot of these questions are specific to your grant and would be helpful in conjunction with your program specialist. So for time's sake, I would recommend reaching out to your assigned program specialist, but we'll also include these in our FAQ document.
Thank you so much, Karen. So going on then to the next question, again, we have a screenshot here, going into a little bit more on what these definitions are. So unexpended funds are carryover funds. Almost all of you have this. Mark yes or no. If you answer yes, then you need to respond to question 1A and provide an explanation. It's extremely important that we know why you had carryover funds and your plan to spend those carryover funds. Some of you may have already submitted a carryover plan to your program specialist. If they've requested it, that's fine. You can include information from that carryover plan in response to this question. For question number 2, you should describe any anticipated changes to your budget for FY 2024. However, we're about halfway through FY 2024. So hopefully you've already notified your program specialist about this. Any changes to your budget, you need to make sure that you are also corresponding with your program specialist about them, and you shouldn't rely on the information in the APR to convey this budget change to your program specialist. For question 3, regarding changes to grant activities and objectives, you can describe them. However, as with the budget changes, you need to make sure that you follow up with your program specialist about any anticipated changes. I don't think any of our current grantees have a cooperative development grant. However, if you do, you can indicate that here. Here's a screenshot of the next part of that page. So if you have any community partners, such as other universities or college, school divisions, industry partners, or other government agencies, please list those who those are here. And then question 6 is one of the most important sections of the report. And I believe there are only 2 or 3 sections of the report that allow you to write up to 500 words. This is one of those sections. So if you were not able to meet your goals and objectives for this reporting period, here's where you describe why you didn't meet your goals and objectives. But more importantly is, what is your plan for meeting those goals and objectives. In addition, please make sure that you specifically state and that you provide an assurance that you will work through the issue and that you will be successful in meeting your goals and objectives, as well as anticipated dates and schedules. One thing that's very important for all of you to understand is that in addition to us as your program specialists reviewing your reports, assisting you in any way that we can, providing this webinar, any type of technical assistance, there are other individuals who also have access to your reports and who may read your report. These reports are part of an official file. So it's very important that in addition to anything that you may tell us through email or any meeting that we may have through Teams or on the phone, that it be documented in this report that yes, you had problems meeting your goals and objectives, but yes, you have a plan for meeting these goals and objectives. You anticipate meeting your goals and objectives, and this is your plan to meet those goals and objectives. It needs to be stated out in black and white. So moving on then to the institutionalization section. We emphasize, as we do during the pre-application technical assistance workshop, that institutionalization begins when you get the grant funding. So as I said before, these grants are institutional grants to bring about institution-wide change, system-wide change at your colleges and university. The institutionalization should begin when you get the grant funding. So this section attempts to capture the steps that you're taking to see what can be institutionalized and paid for by your college or university. So there are a few minor changes to this chart. So for the first chart, for question 1, you should identify the allowable activities that are being institutionalized, the corresponding expenditures, and the financial costs. You should be using the line items for the Ed 524B standard budget form for any line items that the college or university is institutionalizing. For clarification, a cost is generally considered a one-time payment, and an expenditure is best described as an amount paid regularly towards ongoing business operations. Let me just state here, there's a lot of anxiety related to this. We don't expect you to provide, amounts down to the cent. Just do your best. We also know that you're estimating in this section. And if you are in your first or your second year, you may not have a lot to report on institutionalization. However, having this section here is a reminder that you need to be thinking about this now. In question Q1B, describe your plan to institutionalize these costs. In Q1C, you should list challenges, successes, or failures regarding institutionalizing any of these activities. And in question 2, you should describe how the grant has facilitated or contributed to your school or university in being able to bring new grant dollars to your institution. So money follows money. So hopefully, because you got this grant from the HSI division, that has made your school look very good to others who may be considering providing you with grant funds. So we want to know, what other kinds of funds has your institution received? Hopefully as a result of this grant. Remember, as I said before, that if something does not apply to your project in this section, for example, you just started your project, you're in year 1 or 2, then you can enter NA if that's the case, but you should include a brief explanation if you're not providing any data in this section. So you can say, we got a late start, we're in year 1, we haven't been able to institutionalize anything, or maybe you're in year 2, you can say we are thinking of institutionalizing the following. However, there are ongoing talks and we will be providing additional details in year 3. Something like that. If you put NA or you don't put any data, then you need to provide a brief explanation for why you're not including any data. Are there any questions that I need to address, Corinne?
Yes, there, and I'm responding to a budget question. So this one is
Thank you.
about question regarding the project director being the only person who could submit the APR. Is the submission the same as the certification of the APR? We have a project director, but our certification staff is a different person.
That's a great question. There's a slide that will address that, but whoever completes the APR is providing their certification at the time that they submit it. So there is no longer like a certification area. Rather, when the person who's doing the APR logs on, their data is captured, and when they submit it, that submission is considered the certification. Any other questions, Karen?
I think that is it for now since I'm responding to the budget questions.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so this is the I think this is the last section. This is for final performance reporting. So if you are not submitting a report for year 6 and you need to log off, that's fine. Again, we're recording this, so you can always come back and watch it. But this section 6 for the final reports is a new section. For the first chart for accomplishments, you should be describing your grant's major accomplishments and the corresponding objective outcome or measure from your approved proposal. You should be limiting this to 1 or 2 sentences per accomplishments. Again, we're looking at high-level accomplishments here. For the second chart for challenges in development, describe your grant's challenges and positive developments. Describe how circumstances develop differently from how it was envisioned. And for challenges, include any corrective actions. Again, as for the first part, please limit this to 1 or 2 sentences per challenges and development. For the third chart for award funding and expenditures, describe the original amount of your 5-year award. Again, remember I told you, you can find that on block 6 of your GAN. If you don't remember what your original amount of your award was, the exact amount of federal funds expended. So that would be within G5. You can go to the G5 record and you can see how much you actually drew down, and then any remaining funds that you will not use. Hopefully, everybody uses all of their funds, but if you do have any remaining funds, then you need to make a note of that here. You should also include a note that states that you will not be making any additional drawdowns and that the Department of Education may deobligate these funds to be returned to the U.S. Treasury. For the evidence section for Q1, you should describe any project results that are directly related to your logic model and to the promising evidence studies. So those were the entry evidence requirements that you had to submit as part of your proposal. For question 2, you should mark yes or no with respect to whether those results led to achieving the relative outcome during the life of the grant. Question 2A asks about lessons learned, and question 2B asks you to describe challenges that you faced as you were implementing your project. This is a very, these questions can, be a little bit challenging, and we do ask that you work with your project evaluator to provide a complete and cohesive response to these questions. We do a meta-analysis of these final performance reports and APRs also, as time permits, and so your answer to these questions on the final impact of your projects is very important to us. Again, continuing along the same the same thinking. For the project reflection questions, please provide information regarding recommendations for colleagues in managing similar projects. Describe how your project is changing institutional practices, whether it be at the classroom level or at the institutional level. Again, these are institutional grants that are supposed to be changing how you run business at an institutional level. Describe specific actions that you've taken to sustain or institutionalize positive impacts from your project. So you could restate some of the things that you put in that institutionalization section that we were just talking about. And then other thoughts or reflections you was to share with with the department or colleagues that may not have fit into any of these other boxes. Again, we ask that you work with your project evaluator to provide a complete and cohesive response to these questions. As I said a moment ago, there is no separate certification section anymore in the APRs. When the APR is submitted, it is automatically certified by the person who is submitting it. So that person sort of gets on the hook, so to speak, as being responsible for the content of the report. We do ask that you save your confirmation email saying that the HEPAS report received your APR on such and such a date at such and such a time. We also strongly recommend that you download and save a copy of your report and distribute it to all of the colleagues that may need it, such as people in budget, people in your institutional research office, and anyone, your evaluator, and other individuals who are associated with the grant. One thing that I did want to point out is that prior to submission, the system requires you to review each section for completion. So if you see a red exclamation point in a particular section, that means that something there was not completed. If you see a green check mark, then that means that that section is good to go. So you have the option to automatically go to the question that has the issue by clicking on the blue button to the right. And here are some tips and common issues that we often see. Again, I've said this before, we all have 80, 100 or more applications, so writing a lot doesn't help us. Please do not cut and paste the same response into various questions, and also don't cut and paste from your application. Make sure that the budgets that you're reporting on match the GAN. So in addition to having a copy of last year's report with you as you are preparing this year's report, also have a copy of that GAN with you. So you make sure that everything is aligned with the budgets. And then going back to the LAA tables, try not to classify too many items as other in the LAA tables. I will open it up to any questions at this point, but I did want to clarify once again that if you have questions about the HEPA system and navigating the HEPA system, passwords, access, and stuff like that, that needs to be addressed to help us. We can't help you with that because we don't own that system. So you can either email them at that email, or you can click on that tab on their website and send them an email that way. Now, if you have questions about program issues or anything related to your specific project, then address that question to your program specialist, firstname.lastname@ed.gov.
And
Excuse me.
I've opened up the mics. I know we're over time, and I was trying to respond to as many questions as I could, but I've opened up the mics if we wanted to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Kurt.
No problem. So if you have a question, please
Yeah.
feel free to raise your hand and come off mute so that we can address your question. Yes, go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, I just had one quick question. On slide 50, there was a bullet point about the certification. It says you need to have 2 distinct individuals certifying the APR, but I thought I understood that it was the person submitting it. So could you just clarify that one bullet point?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have corrected that. I believe that this was for last year's iteration of the APR. That no longer applies. So I'll
Great,
make
thank you.
sure that I correct that before we send out the slide deck to everyone. Thank you for catching that.
Yeah, and then we have a raised hand from Cynthia.
Hi, I just had a question for the section 5, because on the project activities that we have, there's no additional boxes that we can add anything, so I wasn't too sure if that's an updated item in the HEPIS portal, or do we reach out to our program officer for question section 5 and then 1A and B?
Okay, so you're talking about this page, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that when you go into this section, you aren't able to put anything into these boxes? Are they grayed out?
Yeah, it just lists the project activities and that's it. There's nothing additional in the bottom, as it was like in the previous years when the report has been completed. It just lists the project activities. That's it.
So section 5,
1A and B.
So activities listed 1A and B, but no place for you to enter. So the allowable activities are listed, but there's no place to enter for approved expenditures or financial cost. Is that correct?
Correct. And I submitted a screenshot in the chat.
Okay. All right. We'll follow up with Jason on this. Sorry about that. I know they're still working through stuff because this is a new form. Thank you for letting us know.
Yeah, and then if my follow-up question would be if since looks like there are a couple of kinks in this, will we be notified that it's been updated? Just curious.
Yeah, we've made a note of several glitches, so we'll send out a blast email through G5 letting everyone know when the kinks have been resolved.
Thank you.
And I'm just
Thank
noting
you.
in the chat for everyone who has any systems issues, if it would be helpful, please email us at hsinewsletter@ed.gov so that way we can keep track of all the HEPA systems issues in one place.
Yeah, great idea, Karen. Thank you. Who's next, Karen?
Oops, sorry, I was on mute. I'm only seeing the last name, Contreras.
Yes, hi, I'm Anna. I am, this is an interim role for me, overseeing the Title V grant. And my question is, well, I know I'm getting access to the HEPA site where I can go in and do all of this work. But my question was, once the APR is submitted, what happens next? What's the process? After submission, are we gonna do we get feedback, or is this something that gets approved, and then what does that sort of look like?
Well, after the APRs are submitted, as I mentioned before, we review your APRs to make sure that everyone is making substantial progress. And then we make recommendations for the next year of funding. As we review your APRs, if we see anything that we are concerned about, then we will reach out to you directly. So you would get an email or you would get a call from your program specialist letting you know that they have concerns about this or that in your APR. And usually you'll receive an automated message from the G5 system in July or in August, but definitely before September 30th, letting you know that your non-continuation award has been approved. And so your funds are deposited into G5, but you wouldn't be able to access your funds for the new year until October 1. Someone, could you please mute yourself?
Thanks.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, I guess just a follow-up to that. So in the before that September timeframe? If we don't hear anything, does that mean there were no issues?
So I hate to say it, but usually from the feds, no news is good news. But if you don't hear anything back and if you are concerned, please feel free to reach out to your program specialist. Sometimes we aren't always able to get back to you individually as quickly as we would like to, just because we have a very high grant portfolio, as I've said many times. So, if you don't hear back from your program specialist and you want to just make sure that everything's okay, please feel free to reach out to them. We do try to touch base with each of our grantees individually, but again, sometimes because of conflicting priorities, that may not happen. But we are accessible, so just let us know if you're worried and we can update you on where you are in the process.
Sure. And just really quickly, I know for me, and I see other folks who are new to this role, may not. I only got this information from our previous project director, and so for other communications, I know y'all are going to be sending out like this recording, and then the actual APR like forms that you've kind of mentioned throughout the presentation. I know you'll be sending those out, so I don't want to miss that. I don't know if there's a way we can be added to that distribution list.
Right,
Yeah,
that's a great question. Oh, I'm sorry.
and I
Karen.
can actually speak to that. I'm so sorry, Margarita.
No.
Please feel free if you're not the assigned project director. When we send these out via G5, likely they'll forward it to you, but you can go ahead and email us at hsinewsletter@ed.gov. We also have an attendee list after the webinar ends. And then on the newsletter side, the entire Department of Education is undergoing a change to the newsletter system that we used. And that date hasn't been released just yet for when that will launch. So we'll keep you all updated of any changes.
Thank you, Karen, for that. Who was next in the queue?
I see Francis.
I think it's me again. And I am just having, I think, a problem with my brain synapses here. So I apologize asking you to go back. But I'm looking at the budget. And when I think about budget changes we might have made, are those reflected only in the carryover category or are they in the actual budget? You said the actual budget in like column C there needs to match the GAN, what was in the original proposal, right? When you say the GAN, and then the actual budget in column I is the original proposal for the next year. And those are the original numbers. So if we've moved money, that's not reflected in either of those columns. Is that correct?
So any changes to the budget on which you are reporting should be noted here. And if you had carryover funds that were rolled over into that year, then you can make a note of that. We understand that sometimes the changes to the budget, it can get messy because you have carryover, you have changes. Sometimes you may spend more in one category than in another. To get through the APR, the most important thing is that you make sure that you answer all of the questions that have a box that you have to mark or that you have to complete. And then in the narrative section, you can get into the weeds on what those changes actually were. But looking at the slide that I've highlighted right now, those changes, so the changes YN, so those changes are changes that you would have for the budget on which you are reporting. So federal fiscal year 2023 that started October 1, 2022 and ended September 30th, 2023. If there were any changes to that year from your approved application, okay, then you would report on what those changes were. You may have already provided that information to your program specialist. If that's the case, excuse me, you can copy and paste from the email or whatever document into this section. We just need documentation that a change to the original budget was made for the budget on which we are reporting. Does that answer your question?
I am not totally sure. So going back to this again, column C is the actual budget that we were awarded at the beginning of fiscal year 23. Correct?
So approved, so this second column, approved budget, that's the budget on which you are reporting. So started October 1, 2022 and September 30th, 2023. Okay. The
All right.
carryover, which is this first column here, that would be any carryover funds that you may have had from the previous fiscal year. Okay, so you add column 1 and column 2, and you have column 3.
Right. So let me stop you there just for a second. So in column C there, or your column 2, the where it says, for me it says actual budget, for you it says approved budget. That does not reflect any of the changes that we might have made. That matches the original proposal, what the original approved award was, correct?
The budget amounts should be what's reflected on the GAN. So for the approved budget, you shouldn't be including any carryovers. And
No,
any,
I do understand that, but are you saying just the total or the categories? Like if we moved money from one category to another and we got that approved in the first year, so that actual
you can explain that in the narrative section. If you had those kinds of changes, you can explain that in the narrative section. We know that there are going to be changes because of all the issues I just stated, but we need to see here in the approved budget what was originally approved for you. And then everything else is what happened surrounding it. The changes would be any changes from that approved budget, and almost everyone is going to have changes. Francis, I would recommend that you follow up with your program specialist, because I want to make sure that that you're completely satisfied with the response. But just to reiterate, the changes would be for that program year that you're reporting on. Anything that deviated from what you submitted in your original application the year you got funded, any deviations from that, even if it's already been approved by your program specialist, would need to be reported here. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Who's next, Karen?
We have Evelyn has her hand raised.
Okay.
Hello, Margarita. This is just to clarify, because I got a little bit confused. So when we submit the APR, do we still need the signature of the authorized representative or college president, or no?
No,
Okay.
the person who submits it, when they submit it, the certification is part of that, clicking that submit button.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. I'll put it back on that slide. Right here. Who's next?
And then we have Larissa.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Margarita, for taking the question. I'm from the budgeting office. Would you please go back to the budget slide you just had it before? So very quickly, we have carryover budget from the first prior year, then the reporting year this year. The approved budget is for this year. And then we have a total. The expenditure, which are we reporting expenditure for this budget period only, or if we had some spending from the carryover budget from the prior year, do we include that in this section as well?
So in that column that says expenditures, you are reporting everything that the university expended during the FY23 year. So October, anything that you drew down from G5 from October 1, 2022 through September 30th, 2023, that would be included in expenditures. If you had carryover funds from FY22 and you spent those, as well as whatever was in there for FY23, then that would be included. The thing is that when we go into G5, we only see total dollar amounts. We don't see what you spent the money on, what year the money is coming from. We only see whole number amounts. So this is why on this form, you need to, explicitly state where all the money is coming from. So again, just to clarify, that first column carryover balance, that's from FY22. Okay, whatever you didn't spend that should have spent in FY22, that would be in that first column. Right. The approved budget is what we approved for you to spend in FY23. And that would be on your gain. That should be around $600,000 or a little bit less. Total budget is adding the first two columns. Right. And that expenditure is everything that you spent between October 1, 2022 and September 30th, 2023, regardless of what bucket of money it came out of. Okay. Does that help?
It does. It does. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. It does. Thank you. And on that note, sometimes actually we do have time to draw down. You know how the drawdown funds we do after the fact, drawing down. Sometimes the money has been spent, but the drawdown hasn't been done yet because again, we don't, with the 3-day rule, we don't want to hold the money.
Yes.
That all that needs is explanation if it doesn't match with the G5 system.
I mean, if you're doing it within 3 days, I mean, it shouldn't make much of a difference. As long as you requested the money, say you requested something on, I'm just making this up for purposes of our conversation. Say you requested funds on September 28th, but it didn't actually hit the university's account until October 2nd. You can still include that as part of the expenditures for that year.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
You're welcome. I'm glad I was able to answer that question. Who's next, Corinne?
I believe that is it for hands raised, but I'm noting everyone's questions in the chat. Thank you all for putting your contact information for the slides. We'll get back to everyone with an FAQ document on those questions. And then again, if you have any HEPA systems issues, please email us at hsinewsletter@ed.gov.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, we will be putting this on our YouTube playlist. The slides will come out via G5. G5 only goes to the project director and the certifying official. That's just the way the system is set up. But if you provided us with your email, we will send out a separate email blast with the slides to everyone who provided their email addresses to us. Thank you all very much for being here and for everything that you do every day on behalf of your students. And thank you, Corinne, and the rest of my colleagues for all of your wonderful support for this event. Have a wonderful day. Thank you all.
And
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Margarita, for the wonderful webinar.
Thank you, Corinne. Good night, everyone. Thank you.